Hi everyone, I'm Whitney and I post a new tutorial every Wednesday here on YouTube to help sewers of all skill levels learn new projects and techniques. This video is part of my Sampler Sew Along, which is a block of the month style series where I'm sharing 12 different traditional quilt blocks so that we can make a sampler style quilt together from start to finish. If you found this video at random or just want to know more about the series in general, you can find all of the videos that I've posted up to this point linked together in a playlist down below in the description box. While you're there, also make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the rest of the videos in this series. Now on to today's block. It is called Crosses and Losses. It has been around since 1929. To make this block, you can use 2 or 3 different fabrics. You need 2 squares at least 7 by 7 inches, 1 light and 1 darker, 4 squares that are at least 4 by 4 inches, 2 light and 2 dark, and 4 3.5 by 3.5 inch squares from the light. So you may have noticed that I said at least 7 inches and at least 4 inches on the square measurements. And that's because if you're doing half square triangles the way that I show in this series, you can actually start with larger squares, and then this gives you a little more wiggle room and ease while you're piecing your half square triangle units, and then you just trim them down to size later. The reason I'm doing that on this block is because on the last one I didn't get my 1/4 inch seam allowance exactly right, and so some of my units ended up just a hair wonky, and I didn't want to mess with that this time, so I ended up cutting my squares to 7 1/4 and 4 1/4 so that I had that extra little bit of space, and it worked out perfectly. So that is just a personal choice. If you are newer to quilting or piecing, you can choose to cut those squares larger, but the 3.5 inch squares still do need to be exactly 3.5 inches. Lay out the colored squares right sides up and the corresponding light square on top right sides down. Match up all the edges and use a ruler and marking tool to draw a line from one corner to the other. Add a couple of pins, then sew a 1/4 inch on each side of the marked line. Repeat these same steps for the other 2 sets of squares. Carefully cut right along the marked line so you now have 6 half square triangle units. Place each piece with the colored side up so the seam allowance goes toward the darker fabric. Open and press flat with an iron. Repeat for each piece. Now it's time to trim all of the half square triangle units down to size. I'm lining up the diagonal line on the ruler with the sewn line and using my rotary cutter and mat to make it a little easier. The smaller ones need to be cut down to 3.5 inches and the larger ones to 6.5 inches. This is why it's okay to start with larger squares since they will be trimmed down to the exact size at this point. Lay 1 half square triangle unit as shown with a solid square next to it. Place right sides together and sew with a 1/4 inch seam. With the pieced side up, open and press. Make all 4 the exact same way. Then lay them out in sets of 2, rotating so the triangles point together. Match them up right sides together and sew to attach. Open and press the seam. This time it doesn't matter which way the seam allowance is pointing. You should now have 4 units. Lay them out as shown. Match the top 2 up right sides together and sew to attach. Press so the seam allowance goes toward the darker fabric. Repeat with the other 2 pieces, sewing and pressing. All that's left is to sew the 2 rows together and give the seams another press with the iron, and the block is completed. It should measure 12.5 by 12.5 inches right now and will be 12 inches when sewn into the finished quilt. Go ahead and take a picture of your block and share it using the hashtag #SamplerSewAlong so that we can all see it. And then go ahead and pick out your fabrics for the next block in the series that is shown here on the screen in gray. Don't forget, I have all the videos in this series in a playlist, and you can find that linked right over here to the side. And until next time, happy sewing.